Hi everyone, I'm Madeline Dyer and I'm a full-time fiction writer. I'm the author of the Untamed series and the Dangerous One series, as well as a standalone novella called The Curse of the Winged Wight. Today I'm going to be talking a bit about book one in my Untamed series, which is called Untamed. There it is. It released in 2015 via a small press, but when the publisher folded, I then decided to re-release a new version of the book just to keep it in print and so that I could continue the series that way. And I'm so glad I did because I absolutely love the Untamed series. So much so that my second series, Dangerous Ones, is actually set in the same world, but completely different plot, completely different characters. So let's talk a bit about what I love writing first of all, before we get to Untamed specifically. So I love speculative fiction, anything dystopian, ghostly, or paranormal. I'm so like enthralled by these worlds. I can't get enough of them. They're all about escapism for me, and I just love the possibility where absolutely anything could happen. And I'm also moving into writing thrillers at the moment as well, which is quite a new genre for me writing wise, but I've always read thrillers. I love reading psychological thrillers, like authors like C.L. Taylor, Martin Waite, Claire Empson, like Katarina Diamond. I'm just like massive fans, and of course Gillian Flynn, S.J. Watson. So I think even reading my dystopian fiction, you can kind of see my love for thrillers in there because I do use a lot of thriller like techniques in my writing, especially to do with tension and pacing. And all my books do tend to end up quite dark, even when I don't expect them to be. So, Untamed, which is the book that we're talking about today, this is a dark dystopian novel about addiction, betrayal, and survival. And there's some really dark stuff in here, and it was just so exciting for me to write. And it sounds a bit weird saying it's quite exciting to write really dark stuff, but I just find it really engaging and really interesting, especially when it explores sort of the capability of mankind and like it's all about human nature basically. And I do find that thrillers do the same thing. So I didn't intend to set out to write dystopian fiction originally. Untamed was actually the fourth full-length manuscript I wrote, and it began as a bit of an experiment. You see, before that, I'd only written fantasy because I grew up being a massive fan of fantasy. And well, I'd always loved the dystopian genre as a reader, and in school I discovered Brave New World in 1984, and then of course there was the Hunger Games. And it was about this time when I just finished my third fantasy manuscript, and I wanted to try something a little different. And well, the dystopian genre was calling to me because I just loved how it explored like our current world through a lens of a dystopian world, and it's very much about the interaction between a fictitious world and the current society. So it really teaches you about your own world, and I was just really engaged in this genre, and I'd been reading a lot of it, so I just wanted to see if I could write it. It was something fun for me to do, and it was a bit different from all of my fantasy works. So about a week later, I was at my nana's house when the premise for Untamed hit me. It was actually when I was watching a music video, and it was a particular scene where it showed like what I thought was a human heart being sold at a market. And it's only like a 5-second clip or something in the whole video. And I wasn't really sort of paying that much attention to the TV with the music video on. I think I was doing homework or something, and I just looked up and just saw this scene. And it just made me think, well, what if clothes and like food and all the things that you would normally buy at a market, what if they're not the only things you can buy at a market? What if you can buy the things that a heart also represents? Because there's this human heart like being sold at a market, or at least I think it was a human heart. It could have been a pig's heart. I don't know. Anatomy isn't my strong point with biology and all that. So that gave me an idea of like someone going to the market and buying the things that a heart could represent, like love, lust, honesty. I mean, I was very much thinking that they're all sort of like emotion based. And so I wondered about these sort of like chemical emotions that you could buy to control what you wanted to feel. So that's very much where the Untamed world revealed itself to me. And it just wouldn't stop. I was just creating this whole complex dystopian world in my head. And before I knew it, characters were stepping onto the page demanding that I tell their story. So I wrote the first draft of Untamed, which was 70,000 words at that stage, in under a month. And during this time, I discovered that this really was the genre I wanted to write in. Like, I still love fantasy, don't get me wrong, and I have actually written a fantasy novella since then. But I just love how dystopian fiction teaches us about our own world too. And it's this interaction, as I said earlier, between our society and dystopian societies that really fascinates me. Plus, I love writing about survival and rebellion and exploring the capabilities of man and what it means to be human, especially when our world is already striving for improvements in every aspect of the human condition, such as cosmetically and medically. So it's a really, really big genre, and there's just so much you can explore within it. So Untamed, here's a book again, in case you wanted to see it again. I really like the cover. It was designed by Molly Phipps at We Got You Covered Book Design. And this is the 2017 cover when it released. So this is kind of like the UK cover edition, because the press I was with before was American, so it's a completely different cover then. So Untamed is about a world where the population is divided. There are untamed humans, who are essentially you and I, and then there are the enhanced ones. And the enhanced are addicted to chemical augmenters that give them artificial emotions, meaning they choose how they want to feel each day and every day. And as such, they can only feel positive, happy things, because in their society, it is forbidden to feel any negative emotions, because those are deemed to be the root of all crime and unhappiness. So there's no anger, violence, or sadness in the enhanced one society, but this is at the expense of their humanity. And I think in writing this book, I've really begun to appreciate what it truly means to be human. Even in our world today, people are always striving to improve things, wanting to make everything better and make the human body stronger. And in writing about a large group of people who've improved the human condition so that they can only feel positive emotions, I definitely realised the importance of being able to feel everything, including the negative things. It's our experiences that shape us, not just the ones that we wish for. So in Untamed, I also wanted to look at addiction, as it is an aspect of life for many people. And I wanted to look at addiction, but also its consequences. And addiction is something that my main character, Seven Sar, deals with. Having grown up with the Untamed, Seven knows that taking artificial emotions is wrong and that it destroys humanity. She's seen firsthand what it's done to others, and she also knows that the enhanced ones are determined to wipe out all untamed life, believing that their way of life is better and that no one at all should experience negative emotions. So, Seven unfortunately gets kidnapped at the start of the book by the enhanced ones, and she's given some augmenters. So she's untamed at that point, but she's on the process of being converted. So after she's had one of the augmenters, she does actually manage to escape. And this is really what kicks off the whole book, because she realizes she's become addicted to the augmenters, but she still thinks of herself as an untamed person. And the rest of her untamed group, she knows, would not allow her to continue in their group if they knew that she was battling this inner turmoil over like this addiction. She doesn't want to be addicted, and she doesn't truly believe that she actually is, but she craves augmenters and the security and safety associated with them and the enhanced one's lifestyle. Because the enhanced ones, they live like they've got towns, cities, they've got all like medical equipment, whereas the untamed, they're being hunted down by the enhanced ones, so they're constantly on the run. They've got like no access to food and water most of the time. They're having to scavenge and hunt, and often they're raiding cities to try and get basic supplies that they need. So the enhanced one's lifestyle is definitely much more comfortable for Seven, and now that she's had this experience, she does find herself thinking about it a lot. So when her addiction interferes with clear thinking and rationality, survival becomes harder, as does understanding what the true human state is. And this is something that Seven battles with a lot, because she's got like this, she identifies as an untamed human, but she's very aware that she's now looking at the untamed life as in a much darker way than previously, because she's 17 when she's first kidnapped, and up until that point she had been very certain that being untamed was the right thing to be. But this throws a lot of doubt into her mindset, and it's not a clear-cut thing either, because you can't say that all the enhanced people are bad. It's like it's the way of life that is threatening the untamed tradition. So in my untamed world, the augmenters were created to make people feel better and to prevent crime and poverty, to make the world better so everyone can live in harmony without fear. And the augmenters also encourage their users to want to save everyone else from negative emotions, thus creating a perfect world where everyone is safe. Where the majority of the population is living harmoniously together because they're all addicted to these positive emotions, anyone who has the capability to feel negative emotions and be violent is thus a threat to the peace and the tranquility that this whole society is built around. So I've got these enhanced people who are almost robotic, fueled by artificiality with their emotions, and they want to convert all the untamed to save them. And there is a risk that humanity could be completely wiped out because at the start of the series, about 95% of the population are enhanced. And this is the War of Humanity that spans all 4 books across the series. And Seven learns in book 1 that she is a seer, and she has the power to save one group of people, the untamed or the enhanced. And her addiction and her sympathy for the enhanced lifestyle and almost her craving for the enhanced ones, like comforts that they have, does make this decision quite difficult for her. And I really wanted her to have this internal struggle because I think it gives her a good flaw that she's not perfect. She knows she's not perfect, and she is struggling. She doesn't know who she is. So across the course of the 4 books, whilst there's this epic battle going on between these 2 types of people, and like ultimately the fate of the world is in Seven's hands, you've also got this inner battle in herself of her trying to discover who she really is. So I think that overall, like, the series is definitely about showing that negative emotions are important, and without knowing the bad things, how can we really appreciate the good stuff in our lives? But it's also very much about looking at identity, the inner struggles that people face, and of course addiction as well. So creating the dystopian world was quite a complex task, and I think the main thing to know if you're going to create a dystopian world is that you've really got to know your world really well. You've got to understand every aspect of it, and it needs to really seem real to you. And all the rules of your dystopian society need to make logical sense within your world too. That's really important because readers will pick up on it if it's not. So although the rules are going to be oppressive to some, most likely to your main character, readers need to be able to see why they were created. Because these worlds were created to be good, essentially. That's what a dystopia is. And it is always good for some, like the elite, the top people. And I think the origins of a dystopian world are really important. How it came about and how your dystopian society began are both crucial things that you really need to know the answers to. And your readers will need to know the answers to these questions as well. So I think it's really important to show both sides of the dystopian world, like who it's good for and who it's not good for. And it obviously used to work for some people, like all this dystopian society and all the rules that were implemented. Because if they didn't work and they weren't good for anyone, it just wouldn't continue. There'd be like a new society taking over. And it's the oppressive circumstances that usually evolve when things go wrong, or from the warped thinking of individuals who believe they're still making things better but cannot see the bigger picture. So creating this dystopian world in my Untamed series was something I really enjoyed doing. And in the second book, Fragmented, which is, here we go, there it is. This is the book where I really developed the world building a lot further. Because book 1 is very much focused on Seven, and it's very sort of like interior to her and just the aspects of the world that she knows and that she's directly experienced. But book 2 is where they meet another untamed tribe who they haven't had any contact with and who live a very isolated, sheltered life in order to preserve their way of life. And that allowed me to open up the world building to a whole new level, because I just thought, well, they're going to have a completely different experience of this enhanced society and all the oppression to that which Seven and the other main characters in Untamed have had. So I've got my main characters joining a new group of Untamed in book 2, and that's where I linked it into a lot of things from book 1 that were like briefly mentioned. So book 1 does briefly mention like the folklore of the Untamed and the things that they believe, but book 2 is where I really delved deeper into that. And with each of the books, actually, I try to introduce a new aspect of the world building. So book 3 is very much focused a lot more on the enhanced world, and that's really where you get to see it from the enhanced one's perspective. And you find out more about the sort of day-to-day runnings of the enhanced society. And then book 4, the final book in the series, takes a more global view of the whole war of humanity, showing it on a global level. But all 4 books are still narrated by Seven, my main character. So you've got the continuity there, and it does build up. And I think starting with the first book on like quite a small closed level with just one character who is concerning the world building immediately around him, and like expanding it across the series, I think that worked really well. And it kept me entertained as I was writing it, because I was constantly having to think of new ways that this world would work, and I was just answering like more questions that I came up with as I was writing. So that was really, really interesting for me. So dystopian novels are traditionally really fast-paced, especially young adult dystopian novels. And I love fast-paced books, and I like action. So it seemed only natural that my books would be fast-paced and action-packed. And I think employing a first-person present tense narrative really helps to keep the pace up and engage readers. And this is seen quite a lot in young adult dystopian fiction. My series is no exception. It's first person present tense, and my readers become my main character, and they feel and experience everything that she does. My writing's been described as bodily because of this, and I strive to maintain an intimate connection between main character and reader. And when I'm writing, I pay really close attention to the structure of my manuscript and the overall shape, especially where pace is concerned. My chapters often end with a huge revelation or a cliffhanger or a plot twist, and these are always great in making sure that readers keep turning the pages and keep reading. You don't want to give them the opportunity to think, oh, I'll come back later, because there's always a risk that it might not. So you've got to be aware of the pace and aware of the places where a reader might stop, because I think then it's a good place to add in an extra twist just to keep them on their toes, so to speak. But at the same time, I'm careful not to end all my chapters like this with like a huge twist or a cliffhanger, because then it will become overdone and repetitive. You don't want to overwhelm readers. And I don't want anything to be formulaic where readers are like expecting a twist at a certain point, because that's no fun either. So I think you've got to sort of be very aware of the pacing and tension as you're writing, and critique partners are great for this. Like, I'm in this group of critique partners, and there's 5 or 6 of us, and we'll read each other's manuscripts, and we'll just like note the points where we think the pacing's lacking or where we're starting to lose interest. Just so, because like as an author, it's just really helpful to note these things. So although I love action, my characters and well, they go through a lot of action, and there's often not that much time to rest for them. I am aware that they do need breathing space too. Otherwise, everything just becomes too chaotic. So it's about creating a balance. So I might have 3 exciting things happen quickly, followed by a bit of breathing space where the characters begin to plan an attack or work out what's happened and what they can do. Or maybe this will be where the romance blossoms, if there's going to be romance in this book. And there is romance in the Untamed series. It starts off quite gently in book 1, but you can see it progressing across the series. And there's also no love triangle in the series either, which I've seen quite a lot of reviewers comment on. Like, that's a good thing. Although some young adult fiction books are really popular with love triangles. So it's always a personal preference. But I wanted the main focus of my series to be on survival and on identity and addiction and like kind of like the bigger picture things, really. Like, it's not a romance at heart, it's like very much a gritty survival book. So that's why, although there is a romance, it's very much secondary to the plot, because the important thing is about saving the world. So yeah, so as I was saying, I might have a lot of action, and then quickly followed by like a little breathing space. But then the next bit of action I might write after that might be more psychological rather than physical. And I think it's important to write these different types of action just to like give a bit of variety. And that's also true of my cliffhanger chapter endings too. They're not always action orientated. Sometimes it's like this huge realization, others are more emotional. So I think it's the ability to make your readers feel the emotions that your characters are experiencing as they progress through your novel that really helps the pacing, especially if it's intertwined with the right amount of action and a plot that moves at the right speed. So talking about the actual writing of Untamed, there's the book again. Actually, I can show you the whole series, can't I? So there's Fragmented, And then we've got Divided here. The books get thicker as they progress, so book 4 is really heavy. And here's Destroyed, book 4. So I write quite fast drafts, and then I rewrite and revise and edit for months, even up to a year. So as an example, I wrote Untamed's first draft in June 2013. It was 70,000 words, and I did some light edits in it. It was in September of that year, actually. And then from December 2013 to January 2014, I did some huge revisions across those 2 months, mainly concentrating on the structure, pacing, and characterization. There was another round of editing in March 2014 before I began querying this book. And in June 2014, I signed with my first publisher. Had actually received 4 offers on the book, so it was exciting. I did get to choose who I wanted to go with. And then the in-house edits began, and that was 4 more very intense months of editing. So you've got the developmental edits, line edits, and copy edits. And in terms of plotting or not, I always write out a very brief outline before I start. This is just when I've just got like the idea sort of accumulating in my head, really. And it usually takes me an hour or so to write out this rough outline. Very typically, I'll have been thinking about the idea for a couple of weeks or a month beforehand anyway. So I'll bullet point some notes on how I want the manuscript to begin and end, as well as any key events. But other than that, and those notes are very brief, I generally just free write. I guess my outline helps me keep on track, but it still feels as if I'm being surprised too, because my outline is just so rough. Because if I write a really detailed outline, I just feel like I've already written the book. And as I'm writing, I need to be surprised, because that keeps me entertained and keeps me wanting to write the story, because I'm exploring this world too. So yeah, that's very much my writing process, in like very briefly at least. And yeah, so that's all about Untamed, really. It is one of my favorite books that I've written. Like, it'll always be a very special and important book to me, what with it being my debut novel. And it's just really, really special to me. I know I've said that already, but I can't really describe like how special it is to me, because like it released in 2015 when I was 20 years old, and I got the book deal for it the previous year. And it was just kind of, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I dreamt of, like, ever since I was like a child, of getting like my first book deal, and being able to do that at quite a young age really sort of really encouraged me and proved to me that age didn't really matter and I could do this. So yeah, this is Untamed, and it's available on all major retailers and shops, ebook and paperback. So yeah, that's about my debut novel.